She said, "You'll be blocked for 5 days. It's just a girls' trip." I stayed silent, but when she returned expecting my embrace, she faced a truth she couldn't escape. I've spent 15 years watching people lie. Husbands, wives, business partners, politicians. They all think they're clever, but they all make mistakes. That's my job as a private investigator, to catch those mistakes, to pull the thread, until the whole fabric of their story comes apart. You'd think with all that experience, nothing could surprise me anymore. But the truth is, I lived under my own illusion. I told myself that home was different, that my fiancée, Rachel, was my safe harbor in a storm of other people's deceit. I was wrong. Rachel was beautiful, quick-witted, the kind of woman who could light up a room. For 3 years, we built a life together in the house. I worked my whole career to buy it. She was the one place I didn't feel the need to investigate. I thought love exempted us from the rules I enforced on strangers. The lies started, as they often do, small and sharp. Rachel announced she was going on a 5-day girls' trip to Miami with her 3 best friends, Vanessa, the loud ringleader, with a messy trail of ex-husbands, Megan, the follower who lived for likes and comments, and Claire, the quiet observer whose silence always made me uneasy. I offered to help Rachel pack, just trying to be the attentive partner I always thought I was. Then I asked the simplest of questions, her flight details and the hotel name, in case of emergencies. What I got back was not an answer, but a wall. Her eyes hardened. "You don't need to know that," she said. I laughed nervously, waiting for her to crack a smile. She didn't. "What do you mean? I just want to know where you'll be." She crossed her arms, her voice sharp as glass. "It's a girls' trip, Daniel. The point is to get away from everything. That includes you. You don't need to know what happens there. You'll be blocked until I'm home." Blocked? The word hit like a knife between the ribs. She wasn't asking for privacy. She was demanding silence, erasing me from 5 days of her life. I should have argued. I should have begged for an explanation. But in my profession, when someone builds a wall, you don't bang your head against it. You find a way around. My instincts took over, and in that moment the boyfriend disappeared. The investigator took his place, so I smiled, calm as ever. "Okay," I said. "Have a great time." Her eyes flickered with confusion. Just for a second, she had wanted a fight. A fight would have justified the secrecy. My agreement left her with nothing to push against. The next morning, I drove her to the airport. She kissed me goodbye, whispering, "Don't miss me too much. I'll unblock you when I'm on the plane." I told her I wouldn't. She laughed. Thinking it was a joke, I watched her disappear into the terminal, dragging her suitcase already in vacation mode. Then I pulled away from the curb. I didn't head home. I went to my office, because Rachel thought she had locked me out for 5 days. What she didn't know was that I was about to flood her world with light. It began on a Tuesday night, over dinner at our kitchen table. Rachel had just come home from work, still in her scrubs, hair pulled back in that hurried bun she always wore when she was tired. She set her phone face down on the counter and told me, almost casually, that she and her friends were planning a 5-day trip to Miami. At first, I didn't think much of it. Rachel had always been close to her friends, especially Vanessa. Vanessa was the ringleader, the kind of woman who thrived on chaos. Twice divorced, always draped in expensive clothes, constantly talking about freedom and reinvention. Then there was Megan, the shadow, who lived for social media validation. If Vanessa wore red, Megan wore red. If Vanessa ordered champagne, Megan ordered too. And finally, Claire, quiet, reserved, but with a sharpness behind her eyes that made me feel like she saw everything while saying nothing. The 4 of them were inseparable, and I had long accepted that. Still, when Rachel mentioned Miami, something in her tone caught me off guard. There was excitement, yes, but also a hint of something else, a defiance that didn't belong in a simple vacation announcement. I smiled, keeping my voice light. "Sounds fun." "When are you leaving?" "Friday morning," she said quickly. Too quickly. 5 days. Just us girls. I nodded, then asked the question that seemed natural, almost routine for me. "Do you have your flight details? The hotel? Just in case there's an emergency?" Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she set it down, her expression hardening in a way I had never seen directed at me before. "You don't need to know that," she said flatly. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but her eyes didn't move. and there was no smile to soften the words. "What do you mean? I just want to know where you'll be." "That's not unreasonable." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Her voice turned sharp, almost mocking. "It's a girls' trip, Daniel. The whole point is to get away from work, from stress, from you. You don't need to know what happens there. You'll be blocked until I'm home." The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Blocked. Not just distance, not just privacy, a blackout, a deliberate erasure. I sat in silence, letting it wash over me. Inside, the investigator in me was already taking notes, building theories, pulling threads. But on the surface, I showed nothing. That's what years in this profession had taught me. When someone builds a wall, you don't break it down. You find the cracks. So I forced a smile and said quietly, "Okay, have a great time." Her expression faltered just slightly, a flash of confusion slipping. Through her mask, she had expected resistance, a fight to justify the wall she was building. My calm agreement robbed her of that night. She packed her bags with the giddy excitement of someone stepping into a different world. And I, sitting across from her, kept my thoughts locked behind a practiced stillness, because while she thought she was preparing for freedom, I was already preparing for something else entirely. When Friday came, I drove her to the airport. She kissed me goodbye, her perfume lingering as she leaned in close. "Don't miss me too much," she whispered with a wink. "I'll unblock you when I'm on the plane." I told her I wouldn't. She laughed, thinking I was joking. Then she disappeared into the terminal, her suitcase trailing behind her, her phone already in her hand. I pulled away from the curb, but I didn't head home. I went straight to my office, because Rachel believed she had locked me out for 5 days. What she didn't know was that I had just clocked in. The moment Rachel vanished into the terminal, I felt the familiar click in my mind. The part of me that once hoped for innocence was gone. What remained was the investigator, the man who lived in shadows, who thrived on silence. I didn't drive back to our house. I didn't wander the empty rooms pretending everything was fine. Instead, I steered my car toward my office. That small, dimly lit space above a laundromat had been the birthplace of countless cases. Now it was about to host one more, the most personal one of my life. I closed the blinds, powered up my computer, and started with the basics. Rachel hadn't left alone. Her friends had piled into an SUV that morning, laughing, carrying their luggage like they were heading to paradise. I had noticed the vehicle, and I had noticed the plate. That was the first thread to pull. The plate came back to a man named David. Reed, wealthy, venture capitalist, married, father of 3. Not exactly the kind of man who chauffeurs for women to the airport at dawn. A deeper dig showed something else. His company owned a Gulfstream jet. That jet had filed a flight plan to Miami, departing just after sunrise. Rachel had told me they were flying budget. There were no tickets under her name or her friends on any commercial flight that day. The lie wasn't even careful. It was lazy. And laziness was a gift to men like me. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor painting the room in cold light. This wasn't a girls' trip. This was something else entirely, but the outline of it was still blurred. I needed sharper edges, so I waited. In investigations, waiting isn't wasted time. Waiting lets the other side grow comfortable, careless. And when people are careless, they show you everything you need to see. Rachel had me blocked, but her friends didn't have the discipline she thought they did. Someone would post, someone always posts. The silence in my office was thick, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional buzz of notifications as I set up monitoring feeds, social media trackers, and keyword alerts. Each alert was a fishing line cast into dark water. It was only a matter of time before something bit. Hours passed, then a ripple Megan, the follower. The girl who couldn't take a step without broadcasting it to the world. She posted the first picture. For women by a pool, cocktails in hand, smiles wide. At first glance, it was perfect, carefree, harmless, exactly what Rachel wanted me to believe, but I didn't see what was meant to be seen. I looked for what wasn't supposed to be there, and in the mirrored lens of Megan's sunglasses, a shape appeared, a man sitting across from them at a private cabana. Not a waiter, not a passerby, someone who belonged. It was the first crack in their facade. I saved the photo, cataloged it, and waited for more, because this was just the beginning. Social media was about to hand me the truth on a silver platter, one careless post at a time. Rachel thought she had built a perfect blackout. What she had really done was free me from playing the role of the trusting fiancé. I no longer had to smile and nod while doubts gnawed at me. I was free to follow the trail with every tool I had. And the trail had already begun to glow. The first photo Megan posted was only the spark. The real fire started in the days that followed. I kept every device around me lit with monitoring feeds: my phone, my laptop, the second-hand tablet on my desk. Each buzz of a notification felt like a whisper from the shadows. And Megan, true to her nature, couldn't stop talking to the world through pictures. She thought she was curating a highlight reel of friendship and fun. To me, she was providing evidence, time-stamped and geotagged, served on a silver platter. The second post was a short video clip at a nightclub. Loud music, flashing lights, the four of them dancing in a circle. To anyone else, it looked innocent. But I watched, frame by frame, slowing it down until the blur of the strobe lights revealed more than they intended. Behind them, Vanessa leaned against a man in a tailored suit. He whispered in her ear, and she laughed, pressing into him like they were the only two people in the room. That man was no stranger. His face had appeared on business forums and corporate profiles. He was David Reed, the owner of the very jet that had carried them to Miami. The lie wasn't even subtle anymore. Hours later, another post arrived, this time from Claire, the quiet one. A group shot at a lavish dinner table, plates of seafood, bottles of champagne scattered across the linen. But it wasn't the food or the smiles that caught my attention. It was the wall behind them. A painting hung there, large, abstract, impossible to mistake once you'd seen it before. I ran a reverse image search, my fingers moving with the ease of habit. Less than 5 minutes later, the result appeared. The artwork belonged to the private penthouse suite of a casino resort in Miami, a suite closed to the public, a suite reserved for high rollers and their chosen guests, a suite registered that very week under the name David Reed. Rachel hadn't flown out for margaritas with her friends. She had been escorted into a world she hadn't told me about, a world of privilege, secrets, and men who could buy silence with a swipe of a pen. The more I dug, the clearer it became. They weren't careful because they thought blocking me had locked me out completely. What they didn't understand was that secrecy creates arrogance, and arrogance leaves fingerprints everywhere. Then came the photo that cut deepest: Megan again, standing by a pool in the afternoon sun, her smile-wide sunglasses reflecting the bright blue water. But in the background, just out of focus, sat Rachel, my Rachel, a drink in her hand, laughing and leaning toward a man whose face was turned slightly away. I froze the frame, enlarged it. The profile was blurred, but the outline of his jaw, the way he held his shoulders, it wasn't a stranger. It was someone I had seen before. I isolated the audio track from another clip, cleaned it, ran it through the software I'd built over years of investigative work. The program compared voice patterns, pulling from samples I kept in my files. When the result flashed on the screen, my stomach tightened. The voice matched Ethan Clark, her ex-fiancé, the man she told me had cheated on her, humiliated her, broken her heart, the man she claimed to despise. Rachel hadn't just gone to Miami for a girls' trip. She had gone back to the very person she swore was her past, and she had done it on another man's dime, wrapped in luxury, hidden behind a curtain of lies she thought would hold. I sat in the dark office, the evidence spread out before me like shards of broken glass. The picture was clear now. The blackout wasn't a wall, it was a cover story. She hadn't erased me for 5 days. She had erased me because the truth was too ugly to risk me finding. But I had found it anyway. And now the question wasn't if I would act, the question was how. The software didn't lie. The voice on that recording belonged to Ethan Clark. I hadn't heard his name in years, but I remembered every story Rachel told me about him. The man who had left her broken, the man who had cheated on her without remorse, the man she said had ruined her faith in love until I came along. I was the one who had picked her up from that wreckage, or so I thought. Now here he was, sitting in Miami, beside her. His voice captured in the background of a careless video, his laugh mingling with hers. For a long moment, I just stared at the waveform on my screen, the confirmation blinking back at me like a cruel joke. The betrayal wasn't simple anymore. It wasn't just about a woman lying to her fiancé. It was about a woman resurrecting the very ghost she had sworn was buried. Pulled up Ethan's file from my archives. Old habits die hard. As an investigator, I keep notes, records, fragments of people's lives, even when I don't need them anymore. Ethan Clark was a real estate developer, flashy, ambitious, and reckless. He lived on borrowed money and other people's trust. His name had surfaced in a dozen lawsuits over the years, though he always slipped through the cracks before anything stuck, and now, somehow, he had found his way back into Rachel's life. The question clawed at me. Was this trip planned around him all along? Was David Reed just the bankroll, the man, providing the luxury setting, while Ethan played host? Or had Rachel sought Ethan out on her own, reviving a bond I thought she had severed forever? The images replayed in my mind, Rachel laughing, leaning closer, her body angled toward him like it remembered its place. I thought about all those nights when she told me she couldn't stand the sound of his name, when she rolled her eyes at the mention of his infidelity. Were those memories real, or were they rehearsed lines fed to me so I would believe she had chosen something better? I sat back in my chair, the weight of it pressing down. Betrayal from a stranger wounds. Betrayal from a partner destroys. But betrayal with an old flame bat cuts the deepest, because it forces you to wonder if you were ever anything more than a stand-in. The investigation had started with curiosity. Now it carried a different fuel rage, sharpened into focus. I wasn't simply uncovering lies. I was preparing to dismantle a performance staged at my expense. I began connecting dots. Ethan's company had been circling financial trouble for months. Court filings, arbitration hearings, whispers from colleagues. Who knew his empire was cracking? What better way to patch the facade than cozying up to men like David Reed, men with deep pockets and a taste for entertainment? Rachel wasn't just rekindling an old romance. She was part of a transaction, a pawn in a game she probably thought she controlled. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that every performance ends when the lights go out. And I had already started preparing to flip the switch. Rachel thought she was in Miami, escaping me. Ethan thought he had stepped back into her life unnoticed. Reed thought his wealth bought him discretion. They were all wrong because I wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. I was planning consequences. Once Ethan's voice confirmed what my eyes already suspected, the investigation shifted. Up until then, I had been uncovering lies. Now I was drafting a sentence. In my line of work, the difference between discovery and justice is evidence. Evidence wins cases. Evidence destroys reputations. Evidence turns whispered suspicions into undeniable truths. And so I began assembling mine. The first file was for David Reed's wife, Julia, a surgeon, respected, known for her work at a children's hospital. She had no idea her husband was funding nights of excess with women half his age. I compiled the jet's flight plan, the suite registration, and every photo showing Reed entangled with Vanessa, Rachel's loudmouthed friend. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. Facts speak loudest when they arrive without opinion. The second file was for the press. Ethan Clark had been coasting for years on charm and empty promises, but his empire was rotting. I drafted a neat packet of financial records, lawsuits, and photographs of him in Miami living lavishly on money that wasn't his. Then I slipped it into the inbox of a journalist I'd worked with before, someone who had been waiting for Ethan to stumble. All I did was give him a shove. The third file was the most personal. It was for Rachel's parents. They were old-fashioned, church-going people who had welcomed me into their family with pride. They believed I was the man who would give their daughter stability. They didn't know their daughter had traded stability for spectacle. I didn't send them the file not yet, but I kept it ready, because when this storm broke, I wanted them to understand who had set it in motion. Still, evidence alone wasn't enough. Exposure is powerful, but humiliation burns deeper. And if I had learned anything in this business, it was that the perfect revenge isn't delivered in silence, it's delivered in daylight, where the whole world can see. That's when I found her, Sarah Mitchell, Ethan's girlfriend, 29, a kindergarten teacher. She had believed he was at a meditation retreat in Arizona. I made the call. It wasn't easy. Telling someone their life is a lie never is. But I told her what I had, sent her the photos, the voice recording, the proof dot. At first, there was silence, then came tears. But after the grief, there was something else, a steadiness. Anger sharpened into resolve. By the end of the call, Sarah wasn't a victim anymore. She was an ally together. We set the stage. Rachel believed she would land in Chicago to find me waiting with open arms, ready to hear her carefully edited stories. Instead, she would step into the arrivals hall and face Sarah, not in whispers, not in private, in front of everyone. I could already see the crowd, the silence when truth interrupts laughter, the flash of cameras. Rachel had spent 5 days hiding behind a blackout. I would give her a spotlight so bright it would blind her. The plan was ready. The evidence was filed. The actors were in place. All that was left was to wait for the curtain to rise. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, 29, a kindergarten teacher who lived in a modest apartment on the north side of the city. On paper, her life was quiet, ordinary, safe. But behind that safety, she was living a lie that she didn't even know existed. Ethan had told her he was away at a meditation retreat in Arizona. No phones, no contact, just time to realign his spirit. I wondered if he had said those exact words to Rachel once, back when he wore the same mask for her. I still remember the moment I dialed her number. My thumb hovered over the call button for longer than I care to admit. It's one thing to investigate strangers. It's another to become the messenger of ruin. But truth doesn't wait, and lies fester when they stay hidden. When Sarah picked up, her voice was soft, cautious. She didn't know me anything. I told her my name, told her I was a private investigator, and before she could hang up, I said the words that froze her. "This is about Ethan." The line went silent. I could hear her breath quicken, the uncertainty turning to dread. Slowly, carefully, I laid out what I knew: the jet, the suite, the photos, the recordings, and finally, the image of Ethan laughing. Beside Rachel, his arm brushing against her, as if the years between them had never happened. At first, she didn't believe it. They never do. She said Ethan loved her, that he'd never betray her like that. But then I sent the files. The pictures, the video clips, the audio. I listened as her denial shattered into quiet sobs. Minutes passed, and then, through the tears, her voice changed. It hardened. The softness vanished. "Tell me what you need me to do," she said. In that moment, Sarah stopped being a victim. She became a partner, an ally forged not by choice, but by necessity. We were two people cut open by the same blade, and together we would turn that blade back on the ones who wielded it. We planned everything in detail. Rachel's flight details, her arrival time, the terminal she'd come through. I arranged for a security contact of mine to be there, disguised as a limo driver, streaming the entire scene back to me in real time. Sarah would be waiting, not with tears or accusations, but with something stronger, a truth that couldn't be denied. She told me she wanted to confront Rachel herself, not in private, where excuses could be made. In public, where silence would turn into judgment and strangers would become witnesses. She wanted Rachel to feel what she had felt, that sudden tearing of the world, that helpless collapse when lies are ripped away. Not because I wanted to watch Rachel suffer, but because exposure was the only language liars understand. By the end of that call, the plan was set. Rachel thought she was walking back into my arms. Instead, she was walking into a reckoning, and I would be watching every second of it unfold. The day of Rachel's return arrived, heavy with anticipation. I had spent the night before pacing the length of my office, rehearsing every possible outcome. But no matter how many times I played the scene in my head, nothing compared to watching it unfold in real time. My security contact was already in place, disguised as a limo driver with a phone camera streaming directly to me. His view was steady, angled toward the sliding doors of the arrivals hall. I sat alone in the dark, the feed glowing on my laptop, every sound of rolling suitcases and boarding announcements funneling through my speakers. Her flight touched down at 2:56 p.m. By 3:15. The first passengers spilled through the gates, hugging. Family members dragging luggage across the polished floor. And then I saw them, Rachel and her 3 friends, emerging into the crowd as if they owned it. They were laughing, skin bronzed, shopping bags dangling from their arms like trophies. Rachel's phone was in her hand, her eyes scanning the screen, probably preparing the text she thought I was waiting for, that small smile on her lips, confident. Certain was the last moment she would ever feel in control. Because 10 yards ahead stood Sarah. She looked calm, composed, her posture as steady as a stone pillar. In her hands she held a poster board, large and unmistakable. Printed across it was a crystal-clear photo, Rachel and Ethan at the blackjack table. His arm draped around her shoulders, her smile wide with recognition. The effect was immediate. Rachel froze mid-stride, her laughter strangled in her throat, her face drained of color, her body rigid as her friends stumbled into her, confused by her sudden stop. Their eyes followed hers, landing on Sarah and the damning photograph. The atmosphere shifted, conversations faltered, phones came out. Strangers slowed their steps, drawn by the magnetic pull of a public collapse. Rachel tried to recover. She turned her head, forcing a laugh, as if Sarah were just another protester with a sign. But Sarah wasn't protesting. She stepped forward, her voice rising clear above the noise. "Ethan sends his apologies," she said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "He couldn't be here to welcome you home himself. He's busy explaining this picture to me." Gasps rippled through. The crowd heads turned. Whispers spread like wildfire. Rachel's friends went pale, their faces caught between shock and guilt. Vanessa clutched her bag tighter. Megan pulled out her phone like she couldn't help herself, and Claire looked as if she wanted to vanish into the floor. Rachel's mask cracked, her smile vanished, replaced with a frantic, trembling denial. She tried to move past Sarah, but that was when the second strike landed. A man in a tailored suit approached her, crisp and professional. "My process server." He stepped directly into her path, his voice sharp and official. "Rachel Morgan." She blinked, stammering. "Why, yes." He handed her a thick envelope. "You've been served." Inside were 2 documents, a formal eviction notice and a restraining order. 30 days to remove her belongings from my house. A legal wall preventing her from coming within 500 feet of me or my business. The weight of it hit her all at once. Rachel's knees buckled, her bags fell to the floor, and she buried her face in her hands. Her sobs echoed through the terminal. Her friends didn't move to comfort her. They scattered, disappearing into the crowd, abandoning her the way rats abandon a sinking ship. I watched it all on my screen. The woman I once trusted reduced to a broken figure on an airport floor, surrounded by evidence of her lies and the eyes of strangers. The blackout she gave me had ended in the brightest light imaginable, and the fallout was only beginning. The airport scene was the detonation. What followed in the days after was the blast radius seat shockwave tearing through the lives of those who thought their secrets were untouchable. The first shock landed on David Reed. Julia, his wife, wasted no time. Within 48 hours, her attorney filed for divorce, armed with the file I had delivered. She froze bank accounts, liquidated assets, and moved money into a trust for their children. The prenup gave her the right, and she wielded it like a scalpel. Word spread quickly through the firm where David was a senior partner. A man trusted with investors' money could not afford the stink of scandal. By the end of the week, he was on leave, which was a polite way of saying his career was finished. Vanessa, the ringleader of Rachel's trip, was named in Julia's filings as a co-conspirator in the adultery. It didn't matter that she wasn't married to Reed. Reputation is currency in her social circles, and hers collapsed overnight. Invitations dried up. The men who once flaunted her on their arm now kept their distance. She had become radioactive. Ethan Clark, Rachel's ex-fiancé, fared no better. The journalist I tipped off ran a story that pulled no punches. Fraudulent deals, lavish trips paid with investor money, women on the side. Lawsuits followed within days. His investors wanted answers, and the state wanted paperwork. For a man who lived on appearances, the sudden glare of exposure was lethal. His empire crumbled, brick by rotten brick. And then there was Rachel. The eviction notice gave her 30 days, but the humiliation gave her no time at all. She didn't come back to the house. Instead, her parents drove her from the airport straight to their spare bedroom, where she sat, a 33-year-old woman stripped back to dependence. She tried to reach me. Burner phones, new emails, even letters slipped into my office mailbox. My attorney handled each one, reminding her of the restraining order. Her friends vanished like smoke. Vanessa, drowning in her own scandal, cut ties to protect herself. Megan went silent on social media, deleting every trace of the Miami trip, as if erasing the photos could erase the truth. Claire, the quiet one, disappeared entirely, leaving Rachel without even the illusion of loyalty. I spent that week not gloating, but dismantling what little of her remained in my life. Movers packed her belongings and delivered them to her parents. Home, I changed my phone number. I scrubbed her from my accounts. To Rachel, I became what she had tried to give me for 5 days. Nothing. Silence. The blackout she imposed had circled back with a vengeance. Only this time, it wasn't temporary. It was permanent. But revenge doesn't end cleanly at the moment of impact. It ripples. It festers. It shapes the future in ways no one can predict. And as the dust settled, I realized this wasn't just about watching their worlds collapse. It was about what would rise from the rubble. Half a year has passed since that afternoon in the airport, and the dust that once swirled in every direction has finally begun to settle. What remains isn't silence, it's aftermath. And aftermath has a way of revealing who people really are when the noise fades. David Reed's divorce became a spectacle. Julia fought with precision, and she didn't just win, she dismantled. Him, he lost the house, half his fortune, and the trust of every investor who once believed in his name. His firm cut ties completely. The man who once flew private jets to Miami now drives himself to meetings in a leased sedan, clinging to relevance that slips further away each day. Vanessa tried to reinvent herself in the months that followed. New cities, new parties, new men. But reputation has a memory. Everywhere she went, whispers followed. Her name, once a ticket into exclusive circles, had become a warning label. She lives in borrowed apartments now, her glamour fading as fast as her access. Ethan Clark's fall was steeper. The lawsuits grew into an avalanche. Former partners dragged him into courtrooms, investors demanded their money back, and regulators circled like vultures. By month 4, he had sold off properties to cover debts. By month 6, criminal charges were looming. Sarah never went back. With my help, she filed her own case against him, and she did it with the calm resolve of someone who had already buried the past. And Rachel, her story is the quietest, and in some ways, the cruelest. She spent months under her parents' roof. A grown woman confined to the same childhood bedroom where her high school trophies still gathered dust. Eventually, she found a job at a call center, answering phones for strangers. Her once perfect smile wasted on scripted greetings. She rents a 1-bedroom apartment now. No friends, no allies. Just a woman starting over at 33 with the weight of her own choices pressing down on her shoulders. 2 months ago, my lawyer forwarded me a letter, handwritten, pages filled, with her voice stripped of its usual defenses. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg for another chance. She only admitted what she had refused to see, that the airport was the worst day of her life, but also the first day she finally faced herself. She wrote about therapy, about trying to rebuild, about learning to become someone she could respect. For the first time, she didn't offer excuses. She simply said she was sorry. I read it once, then put it away. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel satisfaction either. What I felt was something I hadn't expected: closure, the kind that doesn't roar, but whispers. The kind that doesn't demand revenge, but allows you to finally let go. And while their lives unraveled, mine moved forward in a way I never anticipated. Sarah and I kept in touch. What began as 2 broken people comparing scars turned into something stronger. Coffee turned to dinners. Dinners turned to weekends together. It's slow, careful, and built on a foundation of honesty. Can afford to compromise. For the first time in years, my life feels real, not staged, not a performance, but a partnership. 6 months later, the truth isn't loud anymore. It's steady. The lies are gone, the chaos stripped away. What's left is something I had forgotten how to recognize: peace. Revenge is a strange thing. In the moment, it feels like fire, bright, consuming, impossible to ignore. But when the flames die down, all you're left with is the smoke, drifting into silence. I had set out to expose Rachel, to tear down the lies she thought would hold. And I did. The airport was proof of that, a public stage where every mask fell away. But months later, I realized my revenge wasn't just about humiliation. It was about forcing the truth into the light, making sure no one involved could hide from it again. Rachel gave me 5 days of silence. 5 days where she thought she could erase me, What she didn't understand was that silence isn't emptiness, it's space. And in that space, I built something she could never touch, a firewall, one that would protect my life from people. Like her forever, I don't think about her often now. When I do, it isn't with anger. It's with a kind of distant sadness, the way you might think about a house you once lived in that has since burned down. You remember the shape of it, the walls, the way it felt to stand inside, but you know you can never go back. Some places are lost for good. As for me, my world is quieter. Sarah sits across from me sometimes in a coffee shop, laughing softly, her hands curled around a mug. I watch her and think about how strange it is that ruin can sometimes open the door to something genuine. We were both casualties of someone else's performance, but together we found something real. I still see the world in layers. I still notice the cracks, the subtle lies, the movements people hope no one is watching. That will never change. But now, for the first time, I've learned to see the good layered in between, the small kindnesses, the honest moments, the people who don't need masks at all. Rachel thought she could block me out for 5 days. She thought she could live in darkness while I stumbled in ignorance. But what she gave me instead was clarity, a silence that became permanent, and a life rebuilt on truth. Behind that wall of silence, everything is calm, everything is steady, everything is safe, and that was how silence became my greatest weapon. What began as 5 days of secrecy ended as a lifetime of truth. Some betrayals break you, others set you free. For me, it was both. If this story gripped you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of betrayal, revenge, and redemption to life. And remember, sometimes the quietest endings leave the loudest echoes.